Welcome to Sparks of Love. My name is Jerri Lynn Sparks, and we have today in studio with us Dr. Rick Vandett. He is my former high school basketball coach. We know him as Coach V at North Wilkes High School in Wilkes County, North Carolina. And he also was my high school English teacher, and he taught me how to write. He is the man who taught me how to write. And he was also my yearbook advisor. I was on the yearbook staff, and he was just a creative tour de force at our school, and I'll get into more of that later. He's joining today with our producer, Evan King, and our studio owner, Scott Fitzgerald. So thank you, Dr. Vandett. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jerri Lynn. It's a pleasure. And one of these days, I'm going to get you to start calling me Rick. I don't know when that's going to happen, but
I feel so weird when I see my former teachers. I cannot call them. They all tell me to call them. Yeah. Your wife, I can call Angela. She's the only one. She is the only teacher that I've been able to call her name. Everybody else is Miss Johnson or, Coach V. I haven't gotten there yet. Even with my college professors, I have a really hard time. It's just, I think it's something about that Southern respect, the people that have taught you. But I wanted to give a little bit of bio of this phenomenal man. So he is Dr. Rick Vandett. He has his PhD, and I want to make sure I get this right. It was in educational administration, correct?
Correct.
And he was the superintendent of the Hickory Public Schools in Hickory, North Carolina. He was a winning coach with our various sports at North Wilkes High School, basketball, and I believe also football, and I think there was maybe something else, right? Softball, yeah. So just, and then he's also an author. He wrote a book about his educational and life experiences to help others called Hurdles, and I read it, and it is such a great book. So useful, practical applications. So many books are just memoirs, and they don't have helpful information. It's just a story to relate, nothing wrong with that. But this one is where he took life's hurdles and turned them into chapter-based lessons, and I loved it. I thought it was a great book, and you can find that book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also at rickvandett.com, and that's RICV like Victor, ANDETT.com. And the proceeds from that book help support the Hickory Soup Kitchen, and I love the idea of that so much. That's really emblematic of his entire life, and I wanted to start with this. So when I was a little girl at Christmas time, I was, I think, 5 years old. We were all around and had the TV going, and all of a sudden there was this telethon, and there was this man on there, and it was a Jerri Lewis Muscular Dystrophy telethon. And there was a man standing out, encouraging people to call and give money, and that impacted me, and I ended up doing that. That man was Rick Vandett. So I have known him since I was 5, which is many decades. I will not get into how many decades, but I've known him that long. And because he was the first person that I saw doing an actionable charity, and for people with disabilities, when I got to school a couple of years later, there was a boy in my school who I didn't know had a disability, and he had these big brown saucer eyes, just dreamy. You could just swim in that pool of brown eyes. And he always had his neck over to the side, and he had a what I thought was a turtleneck, like a really thick muffler type turtleneck. And it turned out it wasn't. His name was Johnny Caudle, and he was my school bus driver's son. And he had some form of muscular dystrophy. And I, of course, was just massively crushing on this boy. He didn't speak. He was just quiet, and he had these big, dreamy eyes. But he always looked happy. He always looked serene. And it was my first girlhood crush. And so I started, doing the Easter seals and things like that. So this man who's on the call with us today, Coach V, I'll call you, how about that, has been influencing me since I was 5. So,
oh, wow.
I know.
And you work with Jerri Lewis? You worked on the Jerri Lewis telethon?
I did. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at a picture in my office right now of me and Jerri Lewis and my other co-host. They flew us out to Las Vegas for a big conference meeting of all the different local television co-hosts. And we got pictures with Jerri Lewis, and it just so happened that the co-host was a woman who had muscular dystrophy. And so I'm standing with her behind her wheelchair, sort of pushing her from place to place during this big banquet. And Ed McMahon spotted her.
Wow.
And he didn't care about me, obviously.
What?
But he spotted her and got Jerry Lewis to invite us over to dinner at his table. So
Wow.
because of this beautiful young lady, we got to have dinner with Jerry Lewis that night.
That's amazing.
Oh my goodness. What was he like?
Down to earth and as nice a guy as you could imagine. Very, very, what's the word I want? A very strong man. He knew what he wanted. He was the boss, no question about it. But is down to earth, and he has a connect. I've already forgot what the connection is. A relative, sister, somebody, former girlfriend, I think, who lived in Winston-Salem, and so he had that North Carolina connection. But very, very down to earth guy. Really enjoyed talking with him.
Yeah, as those Southern girls, you got to watch out for.
What was
That's for
what
sure.
was the year? What year did this happen?
Do not tell him the year. Scott's trying to go obliquely find
I
out
have
my
a reason.
age.
I have a reason for my question. When I was around 10 years old, I was watching the Jerry Lewis telethon on TV. This was in South Florida when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And I was so moved as a child. I remember crying, and I had my mom help me to give a donation. And so every year I gave a donation to the Jerry Lewis telethon. It's just,
Oh my gosh.
it's, and so how they did it was every local area had their own hosts, right? And so they did a network feed. And then so like me watching in South Florida, I wouldn't have seen you, Rick. I would have seen whoever was local to my affiliate. But that's so interesting because it could have been
on
around the
TV
same year.
in the Winston-Salem area.
Yeah. It could have been It could have been around the same time that I.
Well, when did you start doing it, Coach V?
good question. Summer of 76 or 77. Actually, before that. Let me back up a sec. Before I started teaching, actually, and I'll do this very, very quickly. I got a call from a young boy, his family. In fact, he went to Mountain View Elementary School. And he was hit by a car, and the family didn't have enough money for medical supplies, and they'd asked the JCs, of which I was a part, would we do some kind of a fundraiser? I was a disc jockey at the time, and I agreed to stay on the air for 98 straight hours without sleep.
Wow.
And people would call in, all right, and we did it. And I was a basket case when it was all over with. I was
98 straight hours.
I was seeing things that weren't there. But anyway, we raised some money for the young man. His name was Marty Bogus. I'll never forget the kid. He actually went to North High. And a few months later, I get a call from a young girl from Wilkes Central High School. And she said, I heard you one heck of a fundraiser. Would you like to raise some money for muscular dystrophy? I said, sure. She said, I've had muscular dystrophy. And I heard the words I've had, and I thought it was sort of in the past. I didn't know much about it at all. She invited me to her house, and I and another guy from the radio station went to see her, and I was just stunned because she was maybe 85 pounds, all curled up in the bed with muscular dystrophy. It wasn't going to go away for this child. She was going to die. And that young lady, whose last name was also Bogus, no relation to Marty, but her name was Kathy, inspired me to do work for muscular dystrophy. So I did another radio marathon, this time for 78 hours, and we did it in the parking lot of a mall area, and Channel 12 from Winston-Salem came to broadcast, and the producer said, how would you like to come on the air and just read some pledges? Now, this was in the fall of 75 when in my first year teaching. And I said, sure. So I went on the air, and I'm reading pledges, and the co-host is in a nice big tuxedo and everything and having a good time. He decided he needed a nap. Well, as Scott had said, part of it is from a national feed, and when the national feed's over, they come back to the local feed. Well, they came back to the local feed. I was the only one standing there. So I just grabbed the mic and started, spieling the way he did, and did okay. And he got upset because I guess we just let him sleep through his nap or whatever. But I did two different cutaways late at night, and the producer said, "Would you want to come on next year in his role?" I said, "Of course." So I did it for like 3 or 4 years in a row. That's one of the times when you saw me, then more than likely.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I remember everybody was talking about it.
That also got me involved in muscular dystrophy camp because I heard people come and talk about money would go to support young boys and girls who went to muscular dystrophy camp. And the interesting story about that is I got involved in camp and became a counselor and was given a young boy from the Greensboro area whose parents told me he probably would call after 2 days to get picked up because he doesn't like to stay there. Well, he stayed a whole week. We had an absolutely great time. 2 years later, he told his parents he wanted to come home with Angela and me and spend a few days. So we took him home and we took him to North High. He's in his wheelchair, and all your classmates and students at that time would not let him alone. They just took him away from me and kept him the entire week, basically occupied and stuff, so that when his parents came to get him, he said, Mom, Dad, I want to go to real high school. And he ended up graduating from Madison Mayodan High School in the Greensboro area because of the outreach from kids at North High before you had gotten there. But it was that kind of thing that just that one little thing with muscular dystrophy, and I still contribute, of course, obviously, but it was a great experience, and it did my heart proud to see the students at North High reach out and help this young man.
Yeah, I mean, this story is very representative of how he was in school. So, like I said, he was my yearbook staff, my teacher, my coach. And I remember one time you gave us an assignment, and it was in English class in the afternoon. And, I just hit the wall that day. I couldn't write. And I have two stories about you inspiring me. And I said, Coach Vandett, I just cannot think in this classroom. And he goes, go where you need to go. And he sent me out into the world, and I found myself on top of the baseball dugout. And I did my writing assignment all by myself. The whole school's inside. And here is this, skinny little girl sitting on a baseball dugout writing her assignment. And I think it was an essay that we had to do for some exam. And I finished, and I brought it back in and handed it to you. And I've never forgotten that all these decades later because, one, he trusted me. But he also recognized that sometimes when you're trying to be creative, you can't have it like a prescription for that. I needed to be in a space where I felt free, which for me is the outdoors. I just needed to be outside. And I don't know if that would happen today. And then another time, you were having us to memorize Shakespeare. I think it was Julius Caesar. And I had practiced in my bedroom because I was doing this particular lines. We each had so many stanzas we had to memorize. And I had practiced around the edge of my bed, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And when I got into class, I froze. And you're like, well, what's wrong? Why are you freezing, Jerry? I'm like, well, I practiced around my bed. And you grabbed the chairs and you put them in the shape of my bed. He goes, do it. And muscle memory worked, and I did it. And I can do it right now. I can still do it. Friends,
do it.
I'm going to
Do it.
Okay, well, I can't stand up and walk around.
Do it.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones, so let it be with Caesar. That was it.
Wow. He's stupid in A. Very good.
Doctor, that was Coach Vandett's influence on me. I have
Great
not
job.
forgotten it. But to me, that's when a teacher loves what they do. And they really love the brains of their students, and they love the trajectory of their students' education. And I think he really did represent that. I didn't encounter any bad teachers at North Wilkes. I was very blessed. We were a class of under 100. And the way that school was at that time, run by Principal Mitchell, it was just, there was so much creative agency that the teachers had, and there was so much love. And I am still in touch with all my teachers, not just Dr. Vandett. Like, I'm in touch with them. That was a way of love running a school system, running the education system, which brings me to my first question for you. So I've known you and your wife, Angela, for a long time. I wanted to know what your definition of love is.
That's a good question. I've stumbled over trying to answer this to myself a few times, but I guess basically it's the unconditional giving of yourself to make someone else happy, satisfied, whatever it is. It's not the expectation of getting it back in return, although that's the benefit of it, the bonus. But it's being willing to care for somebody else just because you really, really want. You get a lot of the fact of caring for that other person. And of course, you can love a pet the same way, unconditionally. And there are a lot of examples of the unconditional love that goes out. But I think our difficulty is, in our language, you only have one word for love, and it's supposed to be all-encompassing, supposed to mean everything we expect it to mean.
Yeah. In some cultures, there's other words for it. Well, I called my parents this morning at 7 a.m. to ask them this question because I knew I was going to be, interviewing you today. And I asked them this question separately. And my mom said, she goes, it's a deep emotional feeling that you have for someone. And that was my mother's answer. And technically nothing, incorrect about that. And then I asked my dad, and he said almost verbatim what you said. It is the unconditional love where you want to make other people happy. And I kept thinking about that, like the differences between those two answers as I drove over here. And like you said, the different answers in culture. Like, Evan, what is your definition of love?
A chemical reaction that compels animals to breed.
That's called eat.
It's almost like I set that up. I deserve that. I set that up for softball love.
You thought you could prepare literature for me? You think that would work?
All right.
No.
Well, okay, Scott, what about you? What is your definition of love?
I would say exactly what Coach V said. That's perfect. The unconditional giving of yourself to someone else with no expectation of anything in return. Your desire to make that person happy, your desire to make them, give them whatever they need.
So this brings up a question in college. So you, my dad, and Coach V and Scott have all said that it's this unconditional giving to make someone else happy. In philosophy in college, they asked if there's such a thing as true altruism. And I said, yes, of course there is. I give, to my friends, not expecting anything in return. And the philosophy professor said, but how do you feel after you do it? I said, well, I feel good about, the act that I did. I feel like I've made, somebody's life better. He goes, then you get a reward from that. You get something from that. And so his conclusion was that there's no such thing as true altruism because you get something from it. But I came up with an answer, and I stumped this professor. And you probably know what it is. I said, what if in the future I become a mother and there's a train coming and I'm running towards the kid to get him off the track, and I throw myself in front of my towards my child to get the child out of the way, but I lose my life. And I said, I'm purposely, risking my own life to save someone else. That will definitely make them happy, but I don't get any benefit because I'm dead. But he said, I remember this part too, he said, well, you do because you know that your genes get to live on. You know that your child gets to live on. But if you don't live to experience that reward and benefit, does it count? Is that an answer for true altruism? So I don't know if you've ever heard that dilemma or what the answer would be, but we do get something in return, even though it's not a tangible thing or even the reason for it. Right? We don't do good things to feel good about ourselves. We do good things because it is the right thing to do, right?
It is, but also we're not thinking about altruism while we're doing it.
Exactly.
I mean, that doesn't come into play if you're doing it for everything for the right reasons. If you're just reaching out, you want to help somebody, just because you want to help somebody, that's fine. You're not thinking of, oh, look how altruistic I'm being.
Exactly. That's why anonymous donors are really nice, right?
Just doing it, and you're not looking for pats on the back or anything like that,
Yeah.
But as I said again, there are many ways to express love, and you see it around you every day, just in the little things that people do, without defining, oh, I'm doing this because I love something, but they're doing it because they love something.
And because he was my English teacher and he did teach me how to write, I want to know, what are your favorite examples in literature of love? Like, do you have some that come to mind?
Gosh, that's a good question. One that came to my mind was a book called As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. I happen to be a big fan of Faulkner, and in As I Lay Dying, there's the the patriarch of the family is dying, and his wife, his name is Addie Bundren, and I can't remember specifically her words, but the concept of is, not was or not will be, but is very powerful and strong in that book. And it's about that love is. It is always with us. The love she has for her husband and family and everything is not just a feeling. It's part of the existence that is at the very moment. It's almost as though time just is. It's not time is not linear. If you read Faulkner's books, time does not go from point A to point B. It just is. And sort of a way to look at that, you can recall the memories of our classroom and stuff like that at a moment's notice. You don't have to go back through 5 million episodes to get to that day. It's right there, right now. It is.
Yeah.
And thinking of what you want to be tomorrow, it just is. You don't have to wait for tomorrow to occur. That's Faulkner's point, trying to get it. And love is all encompassing. And that's one of the things I got from reading that. And of course, there are just hundreds and dozens of great love stories that, as a former English teacher, are not coming to my mind right now.
What is it about something about those old pieces of literature that still continue to fester within, like you talked about, like Shakespeare and all that? Like, why does that still fester within the sort of cultural zeitgeist?
It's universal.
If I can answer from my perspective, Jerri may have a different look on it. It's literature that lasts if it makes a difference to somebody and if it has a theme that can resonate throughout time. Shakespeare's themes can resonate throughout time. And a lot of the great novels and great writers, and I know sometimes, again, because my age, when I was teaching the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of, and I love American literature, and I taught English literature as well, but Hemingway and Faulkner come to my mind. I love Robert Frost's poetry, and just some of the lines that resonate can stay with people. Jerri recited lines from Julius Caesar that she learned 40-some years ago. Well, 16 years ago.
Yeah,
She's just
right.
Don't give the number.
5
Don't
years
give
ago.
the
5
number.
years ago.
And, I can still remember parts of The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost because of the themes and some of the way people use words, but they kind of stay with us. And I would surmise that people who wrote books in the 50s, 60s, and 70s will have people years from now reciting some of their lines because they may have put some things in there that can resonate over time. I don't know that James Patterson will fall into that category necessarily, but so some really great writers probably will.
Yeah, I think Scott hit the nail on the head. It's the universal message of it. But I also think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the things that tend to stay with me are the human need. It's a universal, but it's also a need. At our cores, we want to survive. And the other thing is there's extremes. A lot of Shakespeare's extreme stuff. We're talking about Caesar's death, like that he was stabbed to death, in the Senate in this play. And, there's a lot of betrayal and quests for power in the stories of Shakespeare. Whereas with Robert Frost, whose homestead I actually toured, by the way, so put that on another one of the things you inspired me to do. I took my kids too. So my kids went with me and we walked around his childhood home, which was nice. Frost compared to Shakespeare, there's simplicity in Frost. The Road Not Taken, there's no pretentiousness. And one of the reasons Hemingway, I think, resonates with so many people is he wasn't trying to be your dictionary. There's a writer, I can't remember his name, that used to write, and he would be on Sunday morning shows, and I had to go to the dictionary just to look up what he was saying. I'm like, no one talks like that in real life, but this guy did. He had a huge vocabulary, but he alienated his audience. I'm an educated woman. I had to constantly look up what this man was saying, where Hemingway didn't do that. Hemingway wrote in everyday speak, but it was so powerful. And one of my favorite Hemingway stories, and this is a story of love with your children, is my youngest, Julian, was reading The Old Man and the Sea in school. And he said, Mom, can we read The Old Man and the Sea as we're going on the sea for vacation? And we did. So I got us all copies. And we got on the ferry at Woods Hole. We went to Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and got on the ferry. And as soon as we got on the ferry, we got by the window, had our table by the window, and we read The Old Man and the Sea. And we read it the whole week we were there. We ended it at the lighthouse in Edgartown, leaned up against the back of the lighthouse, and we finished it there. And Julian snapped a picture of me, and that became my author's page in the book I wrote. So talk about full circle and symbolism, wow. It was awesome and very well planned. But we read The Old Man and the Sea on the Sea. And to me, that was how I show love to my children. If they have an idea or I think that something could inspire them, I'm going to do it. And, whether or not my kid is angry at me or not speaking to me anymore, that memory is still embedded in there. And what you said, Coach V, love is. It isn't love was. Love is. And even when I'm gone, I hope that love is something that they have in their hearts and minds. That's what I think. And even with my parents, we went through years of, especially when I was your student, where I was not happy with my parents. Let's just say that. Yeah. I was not happy with them. I am an independent type. I'm headstrong in some ways, and especially as a teenager, I was. And I don't think they always had the most calm and loving marriage, but they've come to a good place in life now. And so I called them, like I said earlier, and asked them what love is. And I asked them to send me a love box. That's what I asked. I gave them an assignment this morning. I said, before the end of the year, I want you each to write me a letter in your own handwriting, long form handwriting, separately, what love is. And I want you to put everything that represents love to you that you can find in a box and mail me a love box. And then and they agreed, which shocked me. I thought they would laugh at me, They're into it. They're into it. And so they're going to send me a love box. I'm going to have that forever now. And I realized as I'm driving over here, every one of us has a love box. It's just called our heart, So that's my little symbolism for the day. I'm looking at Evan's skeptical face right now.
Okay, so you say love box, meaning your heart.
Yeah.
The thing that pumps blood to your brain.
It is your love box. This is your love box.
But
Evan always has to make it scientific.
Well, no, I'm just because. Okay, I don't know.
Maybe it's like Edgar Allan Poe in The Telltale Heart.
You know what? I like it though because Jerri's the dreamer.
I like the imagery though.
She's the artist. She's got these grand visions of love and all of this really cool stuff. And Evan's like, that's your heart and it's pumping blood to your brain and you can't. Animals,
no, I'm a creative type too. I'm just saying.
Animals are love because their chromosomes are.
Yeah. That's what happens when you're miserable your whole life. You have to come up with
survival,
euphemism.
Right? Survival.
Maybe.
Everything at the end of the day is about that. But another English story that I think Coach V will appreciate is, so my son Grant, who's my middle son, he just got his BS degree in English from SUNY Brockport, and I got the certificate the other day, and I took a screenshot of it and I sent it to him on the family.
I love it's called a BS degree.
I know. I sent him the family. I know that's a very bad thing, but Grant has a Bachelor of Science. I'll say it the full way. And I sent him a snapshot on Madison and Grant and I have a family text that we have going every day. And I sent it to him, and Grant wrote back, this is classic Grant. He wrote, "What? They made a mistake." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I have a BA. I don't have a BS." I'm like, "Grant, you're not going to tell me that you did 4 years of school and you don't know that you have a BS degree." He's like, "I'll be back. I'm going to call," And about 10 minutes later, it's like, Mom, I have a BS degree. He did 4 years of school and didn't know he was earning a BS, but now he's getting his master's in creative writing. So, the English tradition continues. And one of the things I did for him to celebrate and show him I'm really invested in him and his future is there was a performer in the Genesee Country Village and Museum going to do a one-man play of The Telltale Heart. And I took him. That's what we did. I took him for his graduation present last year. It was phenomenal. Like, this guy is so into it. I honestly was scared. He came through the crowd and he was like having in the story, the guy has a manic breakdown. This actor transformed from a normal human to a manic breaking down. He came through the crowd. I was terrified.
Sure, it wasn't like a homeless man who walked in the theater.
It could be, but it was really good. And they had like fireside and mulled cider, and it was just a wonderful thing. But I've tried to find little things that brings English literature to life for my children, because I think it's that love is thing. It's giving them that moment to remember, and it helps the story jump off the page into real life. And that's what you did in class, Coach V. You made the story, jump off the page. And so I just thought that was pretty cool.
Do you think that's a problem with a lot of modern ed? Because I know when I was
you
in high school.
You just graduated,
well, I know
right?
when I was in high school, though, like I like Shakespeare. I was like I did a lot of Shakespeare plays. I was the Shakespearean trained actor. Yeah. But a lot of the people in my generation didn't like it. They thought it was like, how is this like? This is English?
Well, because they didn't have Coach V. You need a coach. You need a teacher like Coach Vandett, who he looked inside the students individually and found what is the thing that student needs to be reached. He didn't teach it like to the curriculum now, where you've got to follow every little.
Shout out to Miss Tenebrusa.
Yeah, but like nowadays, I mean, education's different, right? You have to teach to the test these days. You didn't have that when I was in school, right?
No, not that kind of level of state testing. Not at all.
No.
Really?
We had
so you just like sit around a fire and tell stories?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear him.
He said, "Did we just sit around the fire and tell stories?"
Oh no, they
with
had
rocks
tests,
and chalk, like.
But they had to prove themselves, no question about that. But we were not held to any particular state standards at the time, which have gotten so abused. There's nothing wrong with standards, but you can get to the point where you teach the standard and not the child, and that's where we fall apart right there.
Yeah. I also have to say, I don't know if people can see this, but he has on a Carolina Tar Heels blue pullover. And I don't know if that's one last dig at competitiveness, because I am an NC State fan. So I should have known you were going to do that. I would have worn my Wolfpack hat. I didn't do it. In North Carolina, these are like turf wars. Like you've got your Duke and your NC State and your Carolina. Yeah. So there's certain people in my life that are going to watch this and be very happy. I'm talking about you, Danny Halbrook. And then there's people that are Duke fans. So I just had to put that in there. But that's a good segue into the next thing I wanted to ask Coach V. So certainly in high school, you've got crazy hormones going, and people are experiencing what is probably their first love, like their real love. As an educator, I don't know. I mean, I had a crush on, like I mentioned earlier, Johnny Caudle at age 5, depending on how we define love. I mean, puppy love. But my real, love, I guess, when I first used those words to say to a boy was in high school. And you, as an educator, you get to see thousands of examples every year in the school system. Like, is it really love in high school? Is that what you call real love? It to them, it feels real, right? Like, as an educator.
And it is real.
Okay.
As we look at it at our age, it is not the in-depth love that we're talking about. Yeah. But I can remember as a teenager, 15 or 16 years old, falling for somebody and having somebody tell me it's just puppy love. And I wanted, and I didn't care for the phrase. I knew what they meant, but I also knew that feeling was very deep for me.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about love. I knew what I felt. This goes back to Evan's comments about the chemical reaction, perhaps. But, I mean, there was something going on inside of me. Now, what I felt for Angela when I first met her, totally different from some early romances that I might have had. But I made a point to tell myself that if I ever got older and was dealing with younger people, when they fell in love, never to denigrate that, never to demean what they felt, because in their minds it was real. And those 2 weeks later, there'd be another boyfriend, girlfriend. They break up and then go with somebody else, and it was very real for them at that particular point in time. But let them have the feeling. It's okay to have that feeling, because it's a learning experience. You get to learn what you do mean by love, and what would attract you and what doesn't, and so on and so forth. But when I looked at the question, and I knew that's what we were talking about by the kids, but I see it all the time. But you used the word education when I was in education. And my wife is sitting over here right now. She knows this story. because she was
Hi,
involved.
Angela.
Our son was at Mountain View Elementary School in kindergarten. And you were teaching in North then too? We were both teaching in North. And we got a call that he had tripped and fallen and hurt himself. And so she raced over, and the North High School is about, 3 miles from Mountain View Elementary, maybe that much. She got there in about 8 seconds. And she walks into and she's looking all over for this bleeding kid. Where is he? And she walks to his kindergarten classroom, and there was Frances Roselle, his kindergarten teacher, sitting in a rocking chair, holding our son in her lap, rocking him back and forth, making him feel comfortable. Now, if that's not love, I can't describe it. That's a teacher's love for a student. That's a teacher's love for our little child. And when you go on the grades, as you go through the grades, you can find the same kind of love for teachers to students, that they care so much about a student getting it. I mean, teachers don't do it for the money. Well, I take that back. I did. I have to tell you this quick story. We have a couple of seconds here. I was a disc jockey making $7,800 a year when I graduated from Appalachian State, and Earl Eller called and said, "You want to help me coach football?" I said, "If you get me a job teaching, I'll help you coach." He got me the job teaching. My first year salary was $8,400. I went from 78 to 84, so I got into teaching for the money.
For the money.
but teachers,
Coach Eller, I haven't thought of him ever.
the good teachers care. I mean, I know you've had a good relationship with Glenn Mitchell. He cares.
Yes, my
He's
principal.
an administrator who cares. And
Do you
so
know,
it's
he
the
did
good
something
teachers
really
that make
cool.
a difference. Go ahead.
Yeah, he actually he picked me out of a crowd, and he said, "You're going places, and I'm going to help you get there." And like, he just saw something. Even in elementary school, he came to visit on career day, and he pulled me aside, and he's like, because I had good test scores, and he made sure that if there was a contest to apply for, that I was definitely applying for that. And if I didn't have time from coaching, like in your basketball practice, he would pull me aside. "No, we're doing this right now. We're doing this." And even when I had a shooting slump one time, he came to practice and pulled me aside. Like, he invested in me. And when I graduated, I'll never forget this. He gave me the Miss Basketball Award. And he gave a speech to the school, and he says, "There's never been a Miss Basketball Award before, and there'll never be another one." And I still have that. I still have that award. I don't put it at my house or anything, and I don't think people meet me and the first thing they think of is basketball.
Miss Basketball.
I'm 5'4", so I'm not like a tall person.
It's her. It's Miss Basketball.
That's right. But I was scrappy, and I think that really, kind of surprised people. I was really scrappy, and I like to shoot a whole lot. I also just think that he showed a form of love to me by doing that. And there's so many teachers from that time period that had like that rocking, but maybe not literal, but they were rocking me, in other ways. And I remember Renda Whitley, my fourth grade teacher. I had a broken ankle, and she made sure that, I had what I needed in class to feel comfortable. Another time, a boy was bullying me because my name, Jerri, he said was a boy's name. And I, of course, sensitive young girl, I started crying. She did something very probably unorthodox. She made him feel what I felt. And I don't think today she would have probably been able to keep her job, but I was like shocked, like, wow. Like she went after that bully, and he never bothered me for the rest of
What did she say to him?
Well, I don't want to say his name, but she began doing to him what he did to me. She goes, she did. But it taught him
Dumb
something.
little boy.
No, she didn't say that. She just goes, "Your name. Oh, look at your name. That's a girl's name. Don't we all think that's a girl's name?" Like, it really upset him. He learned a lesson, though. He never, ever did anything like that again. Nowadays, we're not allowed to have that kind of thing. But that was an interesting story. I also wanted to say that Coach V is also a Vietnam veteran. Thank you very much for your service. I know that was a particularly challenging time in our country, and certainly for our soldiers. And I wondered what instances of love that you saw there with your fellow soldiers or your leaders or just wherever. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. When you get in a combat situation, I'm not sure you used the word love correctly, but it becomes situational. we cared about each other. There's a brotherhood of veterans, and we liked each other a great deal. But the unconditional aspect of the definition would come into play during attacks. Now, I was on the receiving end of about, I don't know, half a dozen mortar attacks over the time, but only in one firefight where I had to actually fire my rifle. And everything happened so fast at that time, but the only thing you're really aware of as far as other people is, and thinking of, is you have their back, they have my back. You know, that's unconditional. I have someone's back without thinking about it. It's just there. You're there to protect each other because you want to get through the ordeal at that particular time. When there's not battle going on and things are just regular, routine, everyday thing going on, we wouldn't use the word love necessarily, but it is a camaraderie. There's a brotherhood, but there's also a closeness. My very, very best friend is somebody I only see once every few years, if that much. And I met him in 1965 in Vietnam. And he lives in Mexico now. And when Angela and I went out to San Diego for a book signing for me, he came up to visit.
Aww.
You know, and this is 58 years later, and we're still tight. And that is a close. I love the guy. There's no question about it. But again, here we get with the definition of love. You know, there are 6 different definitions in Greek, and each one means something totally different. You know, like in Scripture, when Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" He asked it 3 times, and then you read it in English, it's love, love, love. But read it in the Greek, and it's a different word each time because he's asking a different thing each time. And so that's what we get. Sometimes we overuse the word. It doesn't always mean the same thing. But I now work with a lot of veterans here in the Hickory area. We're part of a group called Foothills Veterans Helping Veterans, and our job is to help veterans. We meet every Friday at the Hickory Soup Kitchen, where we like to donate money. And it's a great group of people. Not all of them are veterans. Some are widows of veterans. Some are just people who want to help veterans, and others are veterans who need help. And that's what we want to do. And there is a love. We call us a family. There is a great deal of love amongst this group. The one thing we have agreed upon is no politics will be ever discussed in our group because we run the gamut. And the closest guy that I am to this group, he and I are worlds apart. Look at the world through different lenses, but we love each other. And that is unconditional because it goes back to what we experienced years and years and years ago. We have that history in our hearts or our minds, even though we didn't spend time together. Being there with each other now, it's a family, and we do care about each other, and it is a real love.
Yeah, we've got about 2 minutes left. I wanted to ask, that unconditional love that you experience when you have each other's back as soldiers, is that something innate, or are you actually trained by your leaders in the military?
It has to be innate. That you can't train somebody to care for somebody else. It has to come from within. You can tell
I got chills when you said that.
You tell them it's important to, but it has to come from inside. And that's why I said it's situational. Different situations will cause you to experience different things, react differently sometimes, and you just have to be ready. We were trained to protect ourselves. We weren't necessarily trained to protect each other. We were told it was necessary. Of course, we knew that, but it has to come from within.
And you can't train someone to care for each other. So is that what was different about Angela? I know we've only got about 30 seconds here, but you said earlier that it was different with her. Is it from the stage of life you're in? I know Angela, so I know how awesome she is. But for Evan and Scott and our listeners, can you crystallize what it was different about her? You didn't have to be trained, clearly.
When I saw her, it was just lights out. I mean, I knew it. And hopefully we'll get an opportunity, the two of us, to be on there to explain that more fully.
I absolutely plan on it.
It went beyond Evan's chemical. There were some chemical things involved.
I bet, yeah.
Well, she's very beautiful, so I know that has, I think love and beauty, they do go hand in hand, but she's beautiful on the inside too. Well, I think that's a very positive place to end. I could talk with you all day, Coach V, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you again with your beautiful wife, Angela. Thank you so much for joining us today on Sparks of Love.